On a warm spring morning in 1897, a young architect stood in the marble lobby of the new Library of Congress and quietly admitted to his supervisor that the building did not match the plans in his hands. Before we go any further into this story, if you want a brand new American mystery every single night, subscribe. One tap and a new story is waiting for you every evening. The architect's name has been lost to time, but his confusion has not. He counted the doors along the eastern corridor twice. The blueprints showed 7. The corridor held 8. Picture the scene the way it must have looked that morning. Sunlight pouring through tall arched windows. Pale gold light spilling across polished floors, so smooth they shimmered like still water. The smell of fresh varnish and damp plaster still clung to the air. Workers in shirt sleeves moved crates of books up wide stone staircases. Somewhere deep in the building, a steam pipe ticked softly inside the walls. The young man flipped his pages back and forth. He pressed a thumbnail to the paper. He looked again at the door that should not have been there. It was a plain oak door with a brass handle set neatly between 2 marble pilasters. It looked as though it had always belonged, and yet it did not appear on a single sheet he carried. That door, the story goes, was locked. The architect tried the handle. It would not turn. He made a small note in pencil in the corner of his blueprint and moved on, because there were 1,000 other things to inspect that day. By the time he finished his report, the note had been forgotten. The door stayed where it was. The blueprints stayed in their drawer, and somewhere between the drawer and the door, the truth got lost. This is the story of the Library of Congress, the largest library on Earth. A palace of granite and marble that sits across the street from the United States Capitol, holding more than 170 million items inside its stacks. Books in nearly 500 languages. Maps that were drawn before the country had a name. Letters written by presidents, by spies, by inventors, by ghosts. It is the memory of a nation, kept on shelves that stretch for more than 800 miles. And inside that memory, there are rooms that nobody has opened in over 100 years. That is not a legend repeated by tourists. That is something the librarians themselves admit in quiet voices when the lights are low and the public has gone home. There are corridors in the older wings that do not appear on the modern survey maps. There are stairwells that begin in the basement and seem to end somewhere they should not. There are doors with no handles, doors with handles but no keys, and doors that open onto walls of brick. The Library of Congress has been surveyed many times. Engineers have walked it with measuring tape and laser scanners. Architects have traced its bones with computers. And every time the same strange thing happens, the numbers do not match. The square footage on the outside is larger than the square footage on the inside, or sometimes smaller. The walls add up wrong. Closets appear where blueprints show solid stone. Hallways short by a few feet between one survey and the next. The official explanation is simple and reasonable and probably true in most cases. The building is old. It has been added to, patched, rewired, and rebuilt many times. Old drawings get lost. New ones contradict the old. Mistakes pile on mistakes until the paper trail becomes a kind of fog. But there is another explanation, a quieter one. Whispered by night janitors and retired clerks, and the kind of librarian who has worked the same desk for 40 years. They say the building keeps its own count. They say it adds rooms when nobody is looking. They say that somewhere behind the public reading rooms, behind the polished brass and the painted ceilings, there are spaces that have not been entered since the year the building first opened its doors. Spaces still full of books. Spaces still full of paper. Spaces where the lights have never been turned on. Tonight, we are going to walk through that building together. We are going to follow the story from Thomas Jefferson's first 47 crates to the modern survey teams who gave up trying to map the lower floors. We are going to meet the librarians who counted and the ones who stopped counting. And we are going to stand at the locked door the young architect found and wonder what is still waiting on the other side. The story really begins in the winter of 1815, on a frozen road winding east out of Virginia. Picture the scene. A line of wagons creaks along a rutted track, their wooden wheels biting into ice that shines like dirty glass. Steam rolls off the backs of the horses in slow gray clouds. The drivers wear long wool coats the color of wet bark, with collars turned up against a wind that smells of cold stone and pine smoke. Somewhere behind them, the soft hills of Monticello fade into a smear of bare oak and chestnut. Inside those wagons sit 47 wooden crates. Each one is heavy. Each one is nailed shut with iron and stamped with the careful, slanting hand of Thomas Jefferson himself. The crates hold his books, 6,487 of them. Every volume the old man owned. Every volume he had read, argued with, scribbled in the margins of, and stacked beside his bed by candlelight. He had sold them to the United States government for $23,950, not because he wanted to, because he had to. The British had marched on Washington the summer before. They had burned the Capitol. They had burned the small congressional library tucked inside it. 3,000 books gone in a single night, their pages curling like dry leaves in the heat. The young country had no library anymore. Jefferson, deep in debt, offered them his own. That is where this whole strange story starts. With 47 crates rolling north through a winter so cold, the rivers froze solid enough to walk across. Now imagine Washington City in 1815. It was not the marble dream you see today. It was a half-built town of muddy streets and wooden boardwalks. Pigs rooted in the lanes. Cows wandered past the treasury. The Capitol itself was a charred ruin, its dome collapsed, its walls black with soot and streaked white where the snow had washed the ash away. Workmen in canvas aprons crawled over the stones, rebuilding by daylight and stopping when the sun went down. The books arrived to a city that smelled of wood smoke and wet plaster and horse sweat. They were unloaded by men in shirt sleeves, breath fogging the air, boots slipping on the icy steps. The crates went into a temporary building on Capitol Hill, a place called Blodgett's Hotel, which had been pressed into service for almost everything the government needed. A patent office, post office, and now the new home of the Library of Congress. There the crates sat, stacked in rooms that had not been built for books. Lit by whale oil lamps that hissed and smoked and left a greasy film on the windows. The keepers wore dark coats and high collars and wrote their notes with steel-nibbed pens dipped in iron gall ink. They worked by daylight in the morning and by candle in the afternoon. The light those candles threw was the color of old butter. It made every shadow long and every corner deep. Catalogues began at once. Slow, careful, written in cramped longhand on rag paper. The librarians counted Jefferson's books one by one, copying titles, noting languages, marking which volumes had margin notes in the old man's own hand. They worked in rooms that were too small. They worked in hallways. They worked on landings between staircases. And as they worked, the collection grew. Gifts arrived. Purchases arrived. Whole estates of dead senators arrived in boxes tied with twine. By the 1820s, the books had outgrown Blodgett's Hotel. They moved into the rebuilt Capitol, into a long, narrow gallery on the west front, a room with tall, arched windows and shelves climbing up to a vaulted ceiling. The shelves were dark walnut. The floors were pine. In summer, the gallery smelled like warm varnish and old leather. In winter, it smelled like coal smoke from the iron stoves at either end. And here is the thing to remember, the thing that matters for everything still to come. Even in those early years, even when the whole collection could fit in one long room, the librarians could not quite keep up. New books came in faster than the catalogers could log them. Crates sat unopened for months. Some sat unopened for years. A few, the records hint, were simply pushed into back closets and forgotten, while the country fought new wars and elected new presidents, and the city of Washington grew up around them like ivy around a stone. So picture it, 47 crates, then 400, then 4,000. A library swelling in the lamplight. And somewhere in that quiet swelling, the first uncatalogued shadow begins to. The fire came on a cold August night in 1814, and the man who watched it burn was named Patrick Magruder. He was the clerk of the house and the keeper of the small library that lived inside the Capitol. Patrick was a thin man with tired eyes and ink-stained fingers. He wore black wool coats that smelled faintly of pipe smoke and beeswax. People who knew him said he walked the halls like a sleepwalker, always counting something under his breath. That August, Patrick was sick in the country. His brother was minding the books in his place. When word came that the British were marching on Washington, his brother had only one wagon and one cart and 3,000 volumes to save. He saved what he could. He left the rest behind. The British soldiers piled the books in the center of the room, poured lamp oil over them, and set them alight. The flames climbed the wooden shelves like ivy made of gold. Patrick never recovered. He resigned in shame a few months later and went home to die slowly in a quiet Maryland house. But before he left, he wrote one strange letter. In it, he said the library had been bigger than anyone knew. He said there were crates in the cellar that had never been opened. He said the British had not burned everything because not everything could be found. No one paid much attention. Patrick was a broken man writing broken words. The letter went into a drawer and stayed there for 60 years. Into that empty space stepped a tall Virginian with silver hair and a long nose. His name was Thomas Jefferson, and you already know him, but you may not know him like this. Jefferson at 71 was thin as a fence rail and walked with a slight stoop. He wore homespun coats with mended elbows. His hands shook a little when he wrote, but he wrote every day, sometimes 12 hours at a stretch, in a small study at Monticello that smelled of cedar shavings and old leather. When Jefferson heard the library had burned, he wrote to Washington and offered his own books. 6,487 volumes. The greatest private library in America. He needed the money, and the country needed the books, and the deal was struck. 47 wagons rolled north through the autumn mud of 1815, carrying Jefferson's life in wooden crates packed with straw. The man who received them in Washington was a quiet clerk named George Waterston. George had small round spectacles and a habit of humming hymns while he worked. He was a novelist before he was a librarian, and he treated each book like a guest arriving from a long trip. He unpacked the crates one by one, and as he unpacked, he made a list. The list was beautiful. The list was careful. The list, when George finished it, did not match the number of crates that had arrived. There were extra books. Not many, 23 by his count. Books that did not appear in Jefferson's own catalog. Books written in languages George could not name. He set them aside on a low shelf in a back room and meant to ask about them later. He never did. The years filled up with other work, and the strange books stayed where he had left them, gathering dust like patient old men. Then came the second fire. Christmas Eve, 1851. A stove in the basement spit a coal onto a wooden floor, and the flames spread upward through the Capitol's library wing like water running in reverse. 35,000 volumes burned. 2/3 of Jefferson's collection went up in ash and smoke. The night was so cold the water from the fire hoses froze on the steps before it could do any good. The man who walked through the ruins the next morning was a librarian named John Silva Meehan. John was 61 years old, Irish-born, with a white beard that came to a soft point and a voice that never rose above a murmur. He held a candle in one hand and a small notebook in the other. He stepped over blackened beams and curls of paper that crumbled at his touch. The air smelled of wet ash and burned leather and something else, something sweeter, like cinnamon left too long in a drawer. John wrote in his notebook that morning a single sentence. It survives in the National Archives in his small, neat hand. He wrote that the fire had taken much, but that the back rooms, the deepest rooms, were untouched. He wrote that he could not explain why. He wrote that he did not want to. Before the mystery begins, there is the daily life of the place. And the daily life of a great library is a quiet thing, a slow thing, a thing made of footsteps and lamplight and the gentle hush of paper turning in 1,000 patient hands. Picture the Library of Congress in the years after it found its home on Capitol Hill. The building stands like a marble cathedral, pale and heavy, with a copper dome going green in the weather. Stone lions sit on the steps. Carved faces watch from above the windows, each one different, each one wearing the look of a person who has read too much and slept too little. Inside, the floors are polished to a soft shine. The walls hold murals of muses and seasons and old gods, painted in colors that seem dipped in honey. The reading room sits at the center of it all, round as a wheel. Its dome rises like the inside of a great seashell, ribbed with gold. 8 tall arches lean inward. Marble columns the color of cream and rust hold up the balconies. Green-shaded lamps glow on every desk, soft as fireflies in a jar. From above, the desks look like spokes pointing toward the center, where the librarians sit at their tall wooden counter, calm as priests. A morning here begins before the doors open. The cleaners come first, in soft shoes, pushing carts. They wipe the brass railings until they catch the light. They polish the long tables. They sweep the marble floors that run cold beneath the soles. The smell in the early hours is a smell of beeswax and old leather, of paper that has slept for 100 years on a metal shelf, of stone that has held the same temperature since the day the masons set it down. Then the librarians arrive. They wear dark suits and sensible dresses. They carry small keys on chains. Some of them are old, with hair the color of pewter. Some are young, just out of school, still learning the long, secret language of the call numbers. They drink coffee from heavy white cups in a little room behind the desk. They speak in low voices, the way people speak in churches and old hospitals. They have their routines. The mail goes here. The new arrivals go there. The cards for the catalog stack up in wooden trays, waiting to be filed. At 9 o'clock, the doors open. The readers come in slow, blinking, like sleepers waking up. Some are scholars in tweed jackets. Some are senators' aides chasing a single fact. Some are old men who simply love to be near books. They take their seats under the green lamps. They open their notebooks. They write, and the only sound is the soft scratch of pencils and the turning of pages and the far-off creak of a brass elevator carrying a cart of folios up to the higher decks. The shelves themselves go on forever. Tier upon tier of cast iron, painted a soft cream, rising up through narrow stacks like the inside of a beehive. The floors between the tiers are made of frosted glass blocks, so that light can pass down through them, layer by layer, all the way to the bottom. Walking those stacks feels like walking inside a great glowing honeycomb. The shelves smell of dust and binding glue. The metal hums faintly underfoot. Sometimes a page librarian appears from around a corner, pushing a cart with a single book on it, nods at you, and vanishes again into the rows. Day after day, this is how the library breathes. A book is asked for at the central desk. A small pneumatic tube swallows the request and whisks it away. Somewhere deep in the stacks, a bell rings on a wooden panel. A page in soft shoes walks down the aisle, finds the book, places it on a dumbwaiter, and sends it climbing up to the reading room. The reader receives it, opens it, and reads. The whole great machine moves so smoothly that no one ever notices how strange it is. A building this large, with this many rooms, running like a single slow clock. At evening, the lamps wink out one by one. The readers gather their notes. The doors close behind them with a long, quiet sigh. The night watchmen take up their lanterns and begin their rounds. They walk the marble halls and the iron stacks. They check the doors. They mark their cards. For a long time, this was simply the life of the place. A great calm, a great order, a library that knew itself room by room, shelf by shelf, card by card. And then, very slowly, that began to change. There is a stairwell in the Jefferson building that does not lead anywhere. You can find it, if you know where to look, tucked behind a wall of pale Italian marble on the second floor of the northwest corner. The marble itself is the color of cream poured into weak tea, with veins of soft gray running through it like rivers seen from very high up. Visitors walk past it every single day. They run their fingers along the polished stone without ever knowing what sits behind it. The stairwell was sealed sometime in the early 1900s. Nobody can say exactly when. The building plans show it climbing from the ground floor up through 3 stories. A tight little spiral of iron and stone meant for staff who needed to move books between levels without crossing the public halls. Then, at some point, the doors at every floor were quietly bricked over. The marble panels went up to hide the seams, and the staircase inside was left to gather dust in the dark. Here is the part that bothers people who study the building. There is no record of the order to seal it. No memo, no work request, no invoice for the marble. The masons who did the job left no signature in the archives, and the archives of the Library of Congress are, of all places on Earth, the ones most careful about keeping signatures. Whoever closed that stairwell did it without writing it down. And whoever approved the closing made sure the paperwork never existed in the first place. In the autumn of 1908, a young assistant named Miss Edna Hoyle was working late in the reading rooms above. She was 24 years old, from a small town in Ohio, and she had taken the job because she loved books more than she loved people. The rooms above the sealed stairwell were her favorite. The light came through the windows in long, honey-colored bars in the afternoon, and the dust hung in the air like tiny stars. She often stayed past closing, just to walk the empty halls and listen to the building breathe. That night, she heard footsteps behind the marble wall. She wrote about it later in a letter to her sister, a letter that sat in a shoebox in Cleveland for almost 90 years before a historian found it. The footsteps were slow and even, she said, like someone climbing stairs at a comfortable pace, taking their time in no particular hurry. They started low, somewhere down near the ground floor, and they climbed steadily upward until they were level with where she stood. Then they passed her. And then they continued up into the floors above until she could no longer hear them. She pressed her ear to the marble. It was cold against her cheek, smooth as a frozen pond. She heard the footsteps fade. Then she heard, very faintly, the sound of a door closing somewhere inside the wall. A door that, according to every blueprint in the building, did not exist. Miss Hoyle did what any sensible young woman would do. She went and found the night watchman, a heavy-shouldered Irishman named Patrick Doyle. He listened to her story without smiling and without laughing. He told her to wait by the marble wall and not to move. He came back 15 minutes later with a small brass key on a leather string and a face the color of old wax. He told her she had not heard anything. He told her she had been working too late and her ears were playing tricks. And then, before he walked away, he said something she repeated word for word in the letter to her sister. He said, "The stairs sound different on Tuesdays. Best not to be near the wall on Tuesdays." It was a Tuesday. Miss Hoyle never went back to that corridor after dark. She worked at the Library of Congress for another 11 years and then quietly transferred to a smaller library in Pennsylvania. She never wrote about the stairwell again. The letter to her sister is the only record of what she heard that night. The marble wall is still there. The sealed stairwell is still behind it. If you press your hand against the stone, the way she did, you will feel the same cold she felt, the same smooth chill of polished rock that has been holding its silence for over 100 years. Somewhere behind that wall, a staircase climbs up through the dark. The steps are made of iron. They are coated in dust, and nobody alive has ever counted how many of them there are. His name was Ainsworth Rand Spofford. He came to the Library of Congress in 1864, when the place was still tucked inside the Capitol building. He stayed for 33 years. By the time they finally moved into the great marble palace across the street, Spofford had become something close to a legend among the men and women who worked the stacks. He knew the shelves the way a farmer knows his fields. He could close his eyes and tell you which row held the French law books and which corner kept the old maps of the Northwest Territory. And yet, by the end of his life, Spofford had stopped counting. That is the phrase the old clerks used. The ones who had worked under him, who remembered him hunched at his desk with a green lamp burning low. They would tell the story over coffee in the basement break rooms. They would tell it again on the stone steps outside the Jefferson building, when the cherry blossoms came down like pink snow. Spofford, they said, had quit trying to count the rooms. He kept ledgers. Beautiful ledgers, bound in dark leather, written in a steady hand. He logged every book that came in and every book that went out. But there came a day, somewhere in the 1880s, when he simply drew a line through a column marked "Rooms in Use." He wrote the number 119 next to it. Then he wrote in pencil and others. That was all. No explanation, no follow-up, just those two small words, soft as a sigh. The locals on Capitol Hill traded these stories the way farmers trade weather signs. At the boarding houses along East A Street, where many of the library workers lived, the talk would turn quiet after supper. Older folks remembered the first library too, the one inside the Capitol. They remembered the smell of varnish and lamp oil. They remembered the British torches in 1814 and the second fire in 1851 that ate the heart of Jefferson's collection. And they remembered something else, something nobody could quite explain. The old men said the books used to move, not by themselves exactly, not like a ghost story. But you would shelve a volume on a Tuesday, and on Friday it would be 3 rows over, sitting in a spot where no book belonged. The clerks blamed each other. The pages blamed the readers. The readers blamed the clerks. Spofford, the old men said, never blamed anyone. He would simply walk over, pick up the book, and put it back. Then he would stand very still for a long moment, his hand resting on the spine, as if listening for something. In the taverns along Pennsylvania Avenue, the talk was looser. A retired carpenter named O'Donnell used to claim he had helped build a wall on the 2nd floor that wasn't on any drawing he had ever seen. He said the foreman came to him one morning with a folded paper and a pile of bricks and told him to seal off a hallway by sundown. No questions, double pay. O'Donnell did the work. He said the hallway behind the wall smelled like rosewater and old leather. He said he could hear water moving somewhere deep inside, though there were no pipes drawn on that level. At the Methodist Church on 4th Street, the elders had a softer version. They believed the building was simply blessed and a little confused. A house of so many books, they said, was bound to grow rooms the way a tree grows rings. Each year, another shelf. Each decade, another quiet corner where the light fell differently. It was not haunted in their telling. It was alive in the gentle way that old libraries become alive, slowly and without fuss. The black families who lived in the neighborhoods east of the Capitol had their own stories. The cooks and porters and night cleaners who worked inside the building spoke of warm spots and cold spots, of doorways that opened onto reading nooks no one remembered building. One woman, a cleaner named Pearl, used to tell her grandchildren about a small room she found one winter night, lit by a single brass lamp, with a chair already pulled out and a cup of tea still warm on the table. As she left it alone, she closed the door. She never found it again. These were the voices that shaped the local folklore: carpenters and cleaners, clerks and cooks. Old librarians sipping cold coffee at the end of a long shift. None of them held the whole picture. Each one held a corner of it, soft and worn, like a piece of cloth passed down through too many hands to count. Long before the white marble walls rose on Capitol Hill, Before any book sat on any shelf, the ground itself had a memory. The hill that holds the library was once part of a quiet wooded ridge above the Anacostia. The Natchitoches people walked these slopes for hundreds of years. They knew the springs that ran cold beneath the limestone. They knew where the deer bedded down in winter and where the mist gathered in the low places at dawn. Their name for this stretch of land is mostly lost to us now. What we know comes from fragments. Traders wrote a few words in their ledgers. Missionaries copied down a handful of names. The rest passed quietly into the soil, the way old languages always do. The Natchitoches told stories about hollow places in the earth, places where the wind moved against itself, places where a person could step between two trees and come out somewhere else entirely. The early English settlers heard some of these stories. They wrote them down with the careless hand of men who did not believe. One trader, a man named Henry Fleet, spent years among the Natchitoches in the 1620s. In his journal, he mentions a hill where the people would not hunt. He called it the quiet ground. He said the elders warned him that the hill kept what it took. That hill, by most reckonings, is the same hill where the Library of Congress stands today. When the settlers came in greater numbers, the stories shifted but did not vanish. A tobacco farmer in the 1740s wrote to his brother in Bristol about a sinkhole that opened on his property. He climbed down with a lantern. He came back up white as milk. He filled the hole with stones and refused to speak of it again. His farm sat near what is now First Street Southeast. The library's foundation runs through the very ground he tilled. By the time the federal city was planned, the hill had a reputation among the locals. Builders complained that the soil was strange. It gave way in places it should have held. It held firm in places it should have given way. Pierre L'Enfant, when he laid out the streets of Washington, drew a small note in the margin of one of his sketches. 3 words in French. They translate roughly to hollow beneath here. He never explained what he meant. The note was filed and forgotten. When the first Capitol building rose just across the way, workers digging the foundations found things they did not understand. Bones too long to be deer. Stone tools shaped like nothing the settlers had seen. A passage of cut rock that seemed to go nowhere, sealed at the far end with clay. The foreman ordered it covered over, and the work continued. There was a city to build and no time for old mysteries. This is the ground the library inherited. By the time the Jefferson building broke earth in 1886, the stories had been buried under 100 years of paperwork and politics. But the ground itself remembered. The architects ran into problems no one could explain. Surveys came back contradicting each other. A wall measured on Monday would be 6 inches off by Friday. The chief engineer wrote in his notes that the hill resisted true measurement. He used those exact words. The hill resists true measurement. When the lowest levels were finally dug, the crews uncovered chambers that no one had drawn. Small rooms with smooth walls, lined in old stone that did not match any quarry on the work order. The foreman marked them on the rough plans with chalk because there was no time to redraw the blueprints. A circle for one, a cross for another, a simple X for the third. Then the floors went down on top of them, and the chalk marks were sealed inside the bones of the building. Those chalk marks are the reason we have the phrase that haunts this story even now. Rooms marked only with chalk. They appear in the earliest worker logs. They appear in the diary of a young architect's assistant who later went mad in a Pennsylvania asylum and spoke of stone faces in the dark. They appear, finally, in a single line of a maintenance report from 1902. The report simply notes that the chalk-marked rooms are no longer accessible from any known corridor. So when we talk about the rooms nobody has catalogued, we are not really talking about a library at all. We are talking about a hill that was old when the Natchitoches tank were young, and that has been quietly keeping its hollow places for longer than any of us can say. In the spring of 1939, a young architect named Walter Reese was hired to do something that sounded simple. The Library of Congress wanted a fresh set of as-built drawings for the Jefferson building. The old plans had grown crowded with red ink and pencil scratches. Pipes had been added. Walls had been moved. Nobody could quite say where everything was anymore. Walter was 31 years old, tall and thin, with ink-stained fingers and a habit of humming while he worked. He brought a leather satchel, a brass measuring wheel, and a notebook bound in dark green cloth. That notebook is the reason we know what we know. He started in the attic and worked his way down. The attic was easy. Dust and rafters and pigeons. The main floors took longer because they were busy with readers and clerks, but Walter was patient. He drew the great reading room with its painted dome. He drew the hallways with their mosaic floors, gold leaf glinting like fish scales under the lamps. He measured doorways and traced the curve of every staircase. By the end of summer, his notebook was thick with neat little drawings, each one labeled in a careful hand. Then he reached the basement, and the basement reached back. Walter wrote that the first level below ground felt normal enough. Storage rooms, boilers wrapped in canvas like sleeping animals. Hallways lit by bare bulbs hanging from cords. He drew it all. But at the far end of the west corridor, behind a steel door he had to ask 3 different clerks to unlock, he found a stairwell going down. The stairwell was made of stone, not concrete. The walls were rough, the steps worn smooth in the middle, as if they had been used for a long time by people in soft shoes. There was no subbasement on the old plans, not one. Walter went down anyway. He counted the steps because that was his habit, 23. At the bottom, a low passage opened up and the air changed. He wrote that it smelled like wet stone and something faintly sweet, like apples left too long in a cellar. The walls were brick here, hand-laid, older than the building above. He measured the passage at 6 feet wide. The ceiling was low enough that he had to duck under the iron pipes that ran along it. The passage led to a series of small rooms. Walter counted 9 of them, arranged in no order he could understand. Some were empty. Some held wooden crates stenciled with letters that had faded to ghosts. One room held nothing but a single chair, set in the center of the floor, facing a blank wall. Another held shelves stacked with ledgers, their covers green with mildew. He opened one and saw columns of names in copperplate script, but the names were unfamiliar, and the dates ranged from 1851 to 1862. He could not understand what they were doing in a building that had not existed until 1897. He drew everything. He measured everything. He wrote down everything. And then he found the door. It was at the end of the 9th room, set into the brick wall made of iron and painted a flat black. There was no handle. There was no keyhole. There was only a small brass plate at eye level, and on the plate, etched in tiny letters, were 2 words. Walter copied them carefully into his notebook. The words were in Latin, and translated they meant, roughly, "Do not measure." He stood there for a long time. He wrote that he could hear something on the other side of the door, though he was not sure what. A soft sound, like pages turning, or like breath. Walter went back up the stairs. He finished his survey of the rest of the building. He turned in his drawings on the agreed date. But when the chief architect looked through the notebook, the pages for the subbasement were gone. Not torn, not cut, simply absent as if they had never been bound in. The stitching showed no gap. The page numbers ran smoothly from the first basement to the ground floor, skipping nothing, hiding nothing. Walter swore he had drawn them. He swore he had measured. He even remembered the count of the stairs, 23, and the Latin on the brass plate. But when he went back to find the steel door at the end of the west corridor, the door was bricked over. The clerk said it had been bricked over for years. They could not remember unlocking it for him at all. Walter Reese left the project quietly that autumn. His notebook stayed in his desk drawer for the rest of his life. His daughter found it after he died, and the missing pages, of course, were still missing. The east wing of the old building holds shelves that staff have learned not to discuss with strangers. They speak about them only with each other, and only in soft voices, the way you might speak of a relative who wandered off and never came home. The shelves are real. You can touch them. You can run your hand along the dark oak rails and feel the small grooves where 100 years of fingers wore the wood smooth. What sits on those shelves, and what does not, is the part nobody can quite agree on. A woman named Margaret Pell worked as a junior cataloger in the late 1950s. She lived to be 94, and she gave a short interview to a local paper in Maryland when she was 80. She said she walked the east wing alone one winter evening, just before closing. The lamps were low. The brass fittings glowed soft as butter. She turned down an aisle she had walked 100 times, and the shelves were empty. Not dusted empty. Not waiting for new stock empty. Empty in the way a field is empty after a snow. She said the wood smelled faintly of wax and something older, like dried flowers pressed in a book. She stood there for a full minute. Then she walked back to the main hall, took her coat, and went home. The next morning, the shelves were full again, every book in its place, every label correct. Margaret said she never told her supervisor. She said she had the feeling, even at 23 years old, that the shelves had simply been resting. That they had pulled their contents inward for a moment, the way a turtle pulls into its shell, and then opened back up when she stopped looking. A maintenance man named Carl Briggs gave a similar account in 1971, written down by his daughter and kept in a family scrapbook. Carl worked the night shift. He swept the East Wing twice a week. He said the lights in that section had a habit of dimming for no reason, soft and slow, like a breath being let out. One night he heard footsteps on the iron tier above him. He looked up through the metal grating and saw a pair of shoes, dark leather, walking the length of the upper deck. He called out. The footsteps stopped. He climbed the ladder. There was nobody there. But the dust on the floor showed a fresh trail, neat as a row of stitches, leading to a shelf marked only with a small chalk number. He never told anyone but his wife. He kept sweeping that wing for another 11 years. A reference librarian named Anne-Marie Toussaint, who retired in 2004, spoke at a small gathering of former staff. Someone recorded her with their permission. She said the strangest thing about the East Wing was the sound. She described it as the sound of 100 people reading in a room where no people were. A soft rustle, the whisper of a page turning, the gentle creak of a chair shifting under invisible weight. She said you only heard it if you stopped walking and stood very still, somewhere near the third or fourth aisle, where the light from the high windows fell in long, pale bars across the floor. Anne-Marie said it never frightened her. She said it felt the way a grandmother's house feels when you visit after she has passed, and her clock is still ticking on the wall, and her shawl is still folded on the chair. A presence without a person, a waiting without impatience. A young intern named David Cho wrote a short account in 2011 for an internal newsletter. He had been sent to retrieve a volume from a section in the East Wing that the digital Catalogue listed as accessible. When he reached the call number, the shelf held a book he had never heard of. The cover was plain green cloth. The title was hand-stamped in faded gold. He opened it. The pages were blank, every single one. He set it back, marked the location, and reported it. When the senior staff went to look, 2 hours later, the book was gone. The shelf held the volume he had originally been sent to find. David said he could still picture the green cloth. He said it was the softest green he had ever seen, like moss on the north side of a stone. These people did not know each other. They worked in different decades. They told their stories quietly, almost shyly, the way you tell a friend about a dream you had that felt too real to forget. His name was Otto Hartwell, and he had been pushing a broom through the Library of Congress for 19 years when he wrote the letter. It was March of 1923. The letter was addressed to the superintendent of buildings, and it was 4 pages long, written in careful pencil on the back of old supply forms. The letter is still there, folded into a maintenance file that almost nobody opens. It describes things Otto saw on the night shift, in the deep hours between 2 and 4 in the morning, when the great rotunda above slept under its stained glass and the marble halls held their breath. Otto worked the lower floors. He knew every drain, every cold radiator, every loose tile in the basement corridors. And starting in the autumn of 1922, he began to notice that one particular hallway on the southwest side of the cellar level was longer at night than it was during the day. He measured it. He used a length of cotton string with knots tied every foot, and he measured the hallway at 3 in the afternoon and again at 3 in the morning. The afternoon measurement was 62 feet. The night measurement was 78. He repeated this over 6 different nights on 6 different weeks, and the numbers were always the same. The hallway grew 16 feet between dusk and dawn. Otto was not a fanciful man. His letter is calm, almost bored, the way a plumber might write about a leaky pipe. He simply wanted someone to come look. He thought the building might be settling. He thought maybe a wall had moved. The superintendent never replied. Here is where the rhyme begins. Because 40 years earlier, in 1883, an assistant librarian named Marion Hollis wrote a private letter to her sister in Baltimore describing the same hallway. She did not measure it with string. She described it as a corridor that seemed to lengthen as one walked it, the way a dream stretches a familiar street into something foreign. Marion had never met Otto Hartwell. Otto Hartwell had never read her letter. Both of them, separated by 4 decades, described the same stone floor, the same iron sconces, the same green tile baseboard. Both of them noted that the air in that hallway carried a faint smell of cold paper, even though no books were stored there. And there is a third account. In 1957, a security guard named Curtis Bell told an interviewer for an oral history project that the Southwest Cellar Hall ran longer at night, and you knew it because you'd count the doors. He counted 4 doors during the day and 7 at night. He stopped working the night shift after 11 months. 3 witnesses, 3 different centuries of work, almost. 3 people who never knew each other, all describing the same stretched corridor in the same forgotten corner of the same building. Otto's letter contains one more detail that nobody could have planted. He wrote that on the night of February 11th, 1923, he saw a man in the long hallway. The man was wearing a dark wool suit cut in the fashion of the previous century, and he was carrying a stack of books bound in red leather. The man did not see Otto. He walked past one of the iron sconces and turned into a doorway that Otto knew was not there in the daylight. Otto wrote in his careful pencil that the man's footsteps made no sound on the marble. Marion Hollis, in her 1883 letter, mentioned a gentleman of the older order, in dark wool, carrying volumes of crimson binding, whom she glimpsed in the same hallway one evening at dusk. She assumed he was a senior cataloguer she had not yet met. When she asked the next day, nobody on the staff matched the description. Curtis Bell, in 1957, told the interviewer that he had once seen a fella in an old funeral suit walking with an armload of red books down the long corridor at 2 in the morning. He said the man turned a corner that was not there. The same man, the same books, the same vanishing turn, 3 witnesses across 74 years. This is the shape that starts to form when you sit long enough with the records. Not a single ghost story, not a single quirky measurement, but a pattern that repeats itself like a melody played on different instruments. The hallway grows at night. The doors multiply. The gentleman in dark wool walks his slow rounds with his red leather books, and he turns into a room that nobody has ever drawn on a map. Otto retired in 1931. His letter stayed in the file, and the hallway, presumably, kept stretching. There is a story told in quiet voices among the older staff of the Library of Congress. It is the kind of story that gets passed from one retiring librarian to the next, never written down, never put in a press release. The story is about a card catalog that nobody remembers building, and about the cards inside it, written in a careful hand that does not match any clerk on any payroll. The cabinet sits, or sat, somewhere in the lower levels of the Jefferson building. Some say it stood in a forgotten alcove near the old binding rooms. Others place it deeper, near a service corridor that smelled faintly of coal smoke long after the coal was gone. Wherever it lived, the wood was dark oak. The brass pulls were green with age, and the little paper labels on each drawer were yellow as old teeth. 90 drawers in all, stacked in rows of 9, each one the size of a loaf of bread. The first librarian to make a record of it did so in 1908. Her name was Miss Eleanor Witt. She was a junior cataloguer with a steady hand and a habit of writing notes in the margins. She found the cabinet during an inventory of an unused storage bay. The space had not been entered, by her account, in at least 11 years. She wrote in her ledger that the cabinet was full, every drawer, every slot, tens of thousands of cards, each one filled out in faded blue ink. That should have been the end of a small, dull discovery. A forgotten catalog, perhaps abandoned by a former clerk. But Miss Witt pulled a card at random and froze. The card described a book. The book had a title, an author, a date, a shelf location. The shelf location was a section of the west stack that had been built only 4 years earlier. Long after the cabinet, by every appearance, had been sealed in that dusty bay. She pulled another card, then another. Same hand, same ink, same patient, slanted script. Books that had been acquired in 1906. Books bound in 1907. Books that had not yet been processed by the main catalog at all. Cards for items that the library, on paper, did not know it owned. And yet when she walked the stacks with a handful of these cards, she found the books. Each one. Sitting on the shelves the cards described, in the exact order the cards listed them. Miss Witt reported this to her supervisor. The supervisor reported it to his. Within a week, 3 senior men in dark suits came down to look at the cabinet. They stood around it the way people stand around a sick horse, unsure whether to touch it. They opened drawers. They read cards. They closed drawers. They left without saying much at all. The story might have died there if the cards had stopped. They did not. Over the next several years, junior staff who knew about the cabinet reported that new cards appeared. Not many, a few each month, always in the same blue ink, always in that same slanted hand. Always describing books the library had just acquired, sometimes books it had not yet unboxed. One assistant, a young man named Patrick Galley, decided to test the thing. In the spring of 1912, he placed a small mark on the back of every card in 3 particular drawers, 3 little pencil dots low in the corner. He locked the room himself. He held the only key for 9 days. When he opened the room and checked the drawers, the dots were still there. But there were new cards now, slipped neatly into place in alphabetical order with no dots on them at all. 11 new cards. Each one described a book that had arrived at the library during those 9 days. Each one listed a shelf number that was correct. Patrick Galley left the library within the year. He took a job at a small college in Pennsylvania. He never spoke publicly about what he saw. His daughter, in a letter written long after his death, said only that her father had a rule about libraries. He would not enter one after dark. The cabinet, by most accounts, was moved sometime in the 1930s. Where it went, nobody seems to remember. Some say it was crated and stored in a subbasement vault. Some say it was quietly destroyed. A few of the oldest staff insist it is still down there, somewhere, in a corridor that does not appear on any current map. Still full. Still patient. Still being filled, one careful card at a time, in a hand that nobody living has ever seen move. Every library has lost books, books that walk out under coats, books misshelved on the wrong floor for 40 years, books eaten by silverfish or damp or simple forgetting. The Library of Congress loses books like every other library, and it finds them again mostly in time. But sometimes the opposite happens. Sometimes a book appears that nobody can account for. A book that was never logged, never purchased, never donated, never stamped. A book that sits on a shelf as if it has always been there, between 2 volumes that have been catalogued for 90 years, and nobody can say when it arrived or how. The librarians have a quiet name for these. They call them foundlings. The first recorded foundling shows up in a 1908 logbook from the old shelving department. A clerk found a leather volume tucked between 2 atlases on the 3rd tier of the west stack. The book had no card, no spine label, no accession number burned into the inside cover. It was bound in dark brown calfskin, worn soft at the corners, with the title pressed in faded gold on the spine. The clerk wrote down the title carefully. Then he wrote, in a tighter hand below it, that the title did not appear in any catalog he could find. Not in theirs, not in the British museums. Not in any bookseller's record he checked over the following weeks. The book was a treatise on inland navigation, supposedly published in Philadelphia in 1809. The Philadelphia printer named on the title page existed. His other books existed. This one did not anywhere except on that shelf. The clerk catalogued it himself. He gave it a new card. He sent it on its way into the collection, and the foundling, whatever it was, became part of the library, indistinguishable now from any other book. There are dozens of these stories, maybe hundreds, if you count the ones that never got written down. A volume of sermons from a Massachusetts minister who, according to every other source, only ever published 2 pamphlets in his life. A children's primer printed in a small Ohio town that never had a printing press. A slim book of poetry in French, signed in the front by a name nobody recognized, dated to a year when the binding style on the cover had not yet been invented. The bindings are the strangest part. Old librarians who handled the foundlings often described the same thing. The leather felt warm, not hot, not unnatural, just warm the way a coat feels when someone has just taken it off. The pages turned easily, with no stiffness, no brittleness, no smell of mildew or dust. They felt, one cataloger wrote in the margins of his daily log, like books that had been read just last night. And then there were the contents. Most foundlings contained what they claimed to contain. A book on navigation contained navigation. A book of sermons contained sermons. But a small few, contained things that should not have been written down. A folded map of a county in Virginia that was never platted that way. A list of names with dates beside them. Some of the dates stretching forward into years that had not yet happened when the book was catalogued. A diagram of the library itself, hand-drawn in ink, showing rooms that no architect had drawn and corridors that no surveyor had walked. That diagram, if it ever existed, has been lost, or shelved, or quietly removed. The librarian who wrote about it died in 1934 and took the call number with him. The foundlings do not stop appearing. Even now, every few years, a young cataloger pulls something from a shelf in the Old West stack and frowns, holds it up to the light, checks the spine, the flyleaf, the back board, walks it down to the office of the senior staff and sets it on the desk without saying much. The senior staff have seen this before. They open the book. They check the databases. They check the older catalogs, the ones written by hand in green ink. And sometimes, often enough that nobody is surprised anymore, the book is not there. Not anywhere. Not in any record, so they make a new card. They give it a new number. They send it back out into the stacks. And the book, whatever it is, wherever it came from, becomes part of the collection. One more volume among millions. Sitting on its shelf as if it had always been there. Warm to the touch, the leather soft, the pages waiting for the next reader to find them and wonder, just briefly, where exactly this book was the night before. Now, not everyone who hears these stories nods along. There are people who have spent their whole lives inside the Library of Congress, who know the building better than their own kitchens, and who roll their eyes when you bring up ghost shelves and self-writing card catalogs. They have good reasons. And before we go any further into the strange, we owe them a fair hearing. The skeptics start with the tunnels. Capitol Hill is honeycombed with them. Beneath the streets of Washington, a whole second city runs in straight, clean lines. There are pedestrian tunnels carrying staff between the Capitol and the office buildings. There are utility tunnels packed with steam pipes and electric cable. There is the little subway train that hums under First Street like a children's ride. And there are the book conveyors, narrow steel chutes that once carried volumes from the library across the road to the Capitol itself. So a senator could call for a book and have it in his hands inside 10 minutes. The skeptics say this is the answer to most of the mystery. When a janitor in 1923 reports a hallway that wasn't there before, he didn't find a hidden room. He found a service corridor. When a clerk swears she heard footsteps behind a wall, she was hearing the steam pipes ticking, or the little subway car rattling its rails, or a maintenance man walking a route she didn't know existed. The building has hundreds of these passages. Most staff never see them. Most maps never show them in full because the maps are split up for security reasons, with the public ones missing the utility runs and the utility ones missing the public floors. It is a good argument, a clean one. The architect Paul Pels drew a building so large and so layered that even now, 130 years later, the people who work there discover doors they have never opened. That isn't magic. That is just a big building with a lot of doors. The skeptics go further. They point out that fires destroyed records. They point out that the library has been renovated 5 or 6 times, with walls moved, stairs sealed, elevators added and torn out. Every renovation leaves orphaned spaces, the dead pockets between old walls and new ones. Architects call them ghost cavities. They show up in every old building in America. The Library of Congress just has more of them because it is bigger and older and more changed than most. As for the books that seem to appear out of nowhere, the skeptics have an answer for that too: donations. The library receives somewhere around 15,000 items every single day. Some come through proper channels. Some arrive in unmarked boxes from estates, from foreign embassies, from old senators clearing out their attics. A book showing up on a shelf without paperwork doesn't mean it slipped through a wall. It means somebody, somewhere, dropped off a crate and the paperwork got lost in the flood. You can see why these arguments hold weight. The simplest explanation is usually the right one. A building this big, this old, this much changed will produce 1,000 small confusions that look like mysteries from a distance. And yet, even the most stubborn skeptic will, if you sit with them long enough and the coffee is fresh, get quiet about one thing: the square footage. The Library of Congress, across its 3 main buildings, contains a certain known volume of space. Engineers have measured it. They have measured the outside walls and the inside rooms and the thickness of the floors. And when you add up every catalogued room, every corridor, every closet, every utility shaft, every documented dead cavity, the numbers do not match. There is more building than there are rooms to account for it. Not by a little, by somewhere between 2 and 4%, depending on who is counting. 2% of the Library of Congress is a lot of missing space. It is dozens of rooms. It is whole hallways. And nobody, not the architects, not the engineers, not the historians, has ever been able to point at a blueprint and say, here, this is where the extra space went. The skeptics shrug at this. They say the measurements are off. They say old buildings settle. They say the math is fuzzy because the walls are not perfectly straight and the floors are not perfectly level. And maybe they are right. Maybe it really is just bad math and old plaster. But the gap is there. The numbers do not close. And every map of the Library of Congress, no matter how careful, ends with a small, empty margin that nobody can fill. The skeptics have their tunnels and their steam lines, and that's a fine story for the daylight. But the people who actually work inside that building tell a different one. They tell it quietly. They tell it the way you describe a dream you can't quite shake, the kind that follows you to the coffee pot and watches you tie your shoes. There is a reading room, they say, with no door. The first person to speak about it openly was a woman named Edith Hollies. She started shelving in the Jefferson building in the spring of 1947, just home from war work, with ink-stained fingers and a habit of counting things. Edith counted everything. Steps to the staff elevator, marble tiles in the hallway, pigeons on the roof. She had the kind of mind that kept ledgers without meaning, too. She said the room was on the second floor of the southwest stack, behind a section of shelving that held nothing but bound agricultural reports from the 1880s. The shelves looked solid. They were solid. She had run her hand along them 100 times. But on a Tuesday in October, she watched a man in a gray suit step sideways between two of those shelves and vanish like smoke pulled up a chimney. Edith stood there a long time. She wasn't afraid. She told the interviewer years later that fear never entered her chest. What she felt was a quiet astonishment, the way you feel when snow falls inside a barn through a hole you didn't know was there. She walked over and pressed her palm against the wood. It was warm. Not hot, just warm, the way a coffee cup feels an hour after it's been emptied. She never saw the man come back out. She watched that shelf for the rest of her shift. Edith told her supervisor. Her supervisor told her to take her lunch. She told her husband. Her husband told her she'd been working too hard, so she stopped telling people. But she started writing it down in a green cloth-bound notebook she kept in the bottom drawer of her kitchen hutch. By the time she retired in 1981, that notebook had 34 entries. Other staff saw things too. A page named Theodore Briggs swore he heard chairs scraping behind a wall that backed onto nothing but stone. A cataloger named Marjorie Penn said she once smelled pipe smoke drifting from a corner where no one had smoked in 50 years. She followed it. It led her to a blank section of plaster, and then it was gone the way a candle goes out without being touched. These people did not seek out attention. That's the thing that strikes you, listening to their accounts. None of them tried to sell a book. None of them called the newspapers. They mostly told one or two trusted friends and then carried the knowledge around inside them like a stone in a pocket. Smooth. Heavy, theirs. When Edith finally did speak on the record in 1989, she was 71 years old and dying of a quiet cancer. A young oral historian from a university in Virginia sat at her kitchen table with a tape recorder. Edith poured tea. She read from the green notebook in a steady voice. She described the gray suit, the warm wood, the silence that followed. The historian asked her if she believed there was a reading room behind that wall. A real one, with chairs and lamps and people sitting and reading. Edith thought for a long moment. She looked out the window at her garden, where the last of the tomato vines were going brown on the fence. "I believe," she said, "that the building remembers things we forgot to write down." That phrase stayed with everyone who heard it. It became a kind of password among the staff who already suspected what Edith suspected. They would say it to each other in the elevator. "The building remembers." And the other person would nod once and go back to looking at the floor numbers. What did the believers gain by speaking up? Not much by the world's measure. No fame, no money, a few raised eyebrows at family dinners, but they gained something else, something harder to name. They got to stop carrying the stone alone. They got to set it down on the table and look at it in good light and say, "Here, this is what I saw, this is what is true." And the reading room, if it exists, kept doing what reading rooms do. It held its silence. It kept its chairs warm. It waited, behind a wall with no door, for whoever might be next to walk sideways between two shelves of forgotten reports and find themselves somewhere else. The building itself remembers what the paper forgets. That's what the old custodians used to say when they leaned on their mops in the long marble halls. The stone keeps a record the architects never did. You can press your palm against the cool wall of the Jefferson building, down in the lower corridors where the light turns the color of weak tea, and feel a faint cold draft coming from somewhere the blueprints insist is solid rock. The original floor plans are kept in a climate-controlled room not far from the main reading room. They sit in flat wooden drawers, slid in like sleeping things. Most of the sheets are whole. The linen-backed paper has yellowed to the color of an old tooth, and the ink has faded to a soft brown. But here and there, a page is missing. Not torn out in anger. Cut clean, with a straight edge, the way a careful man removes a chapter he no longer wants you to read. Sheet 17 of the Basement series is gone. So is sheet 22 of the northeast elevation. The Catalogue notes them with a small pencil mark and the word withdrawn. No date. No signature, no reason. What sits behind those missing pages, no one has been able to draw since. The grounds outside tell a quieter version of the same story. The library was built on Capitol Hill, on ground that was once an old orchard and a tangle of scrub oak. Workmen in the 1880s complained about the soil. It would hold a foundation in one spot and refuse it 3 feet over. Engineers had to redesign the south wall twice. One survey crew left their stakes overnight and came back to find them pulled clean from the earth, laid out in a neat row, pointing east. The trees on the hill grow strangely too. Walk the small lawn between the Jefferson and the Adams buildings on a still morning, and you'll see it. The oaks on the west side stand tall and straight as soldiers. The oaks on the east side lean. They lean away from the library, their trunks bowing as if pushed by a wind that only blows in one direction. Foresters have measured the angle. It is the same on every tree, every year. Squirrels avoid a patch of grass near the southeast corner. Pigeons, which roost on every other ledge in Washington, do not roost on the third-floor cornice above the old map room. The stone there is clean, white as a bone. No one cleans it. A groundskeeper named Edgar Pell wrote a small journal in the 1940s, kept now in a private collection. He noticed these things and wrote them down with the patience of a man who had nothing else to do on his lunch break. He recorded the morning frost. The frost, he wrote, melts on the lawn in patches, and the patches make a shape. A long rectangle, longer than the building above it, stretching out past the foundation into what should be empty ground. He drew the shape in pencil. It looks like a room. He drew it 3 winters in a row. The shape never moved. The Potomac itself, miles off, used to bend closer to the hill before the city straightened its banks. Old maps from the 1790s show a finger of water reaching up toward where the library now sits. By the time the building went up, the river had pulled back. The men who dug the foundation found old riverbed clay deeper than they expected, and inside the clay, oyster shells stacked in patterns too neat to be natural. They tossed the shells in a wheelbarrow and kept digging. No one wrote down what else was there. A surveyor came in 1962 with new instruments meant to map the bedrock under federal buildings. His readings on the library lot came back wrong. The rock, he reported, gave back echoes that suggested hollow spaces below the deepest known subbasement. He filed the report. He filed a second report 2 weeks later, saying his equipment had been faulty. He retired soon after and would not speak of it. The land knows where the rooms are even when the paper does not. That is what Edgar Pell believed, and what the leaning oaks seemed to whisper in the slow afternoons. The ground remembers being hollowed. The trees remember being asked to move aside. The frost draws the outline every winter, and the pigeons keep their distance, and the squirrels take the long way around. Somewhere beneath the marble, beneath the catalogued shelves, beneath the missing pages of the floor plans, a shape waits in the dark. And the hill, patient as any keeper, holds its place above it. His name was Hollis Whitford, and the records show he was 26 years old in the spring of 1908. He worked as a junior clerk in the Library of Congress, the kind of young man who wore wire glasses and kept his pencils sharpened to needle points. He had a small room in a boarding house 6 blocks east of the Capitol. He drank his coffee black. He wrote letters to his mother in Vermont every Sunday evening without fail. On a Tuesday in April, Hollis Whitford walked into the southeast stack to retrieve a bound volume of agricultural reports. He never walked out. His coat stayed on the hook by the cloakroom. His lunch sat wrapped in brown paper on his desk. The volume he had gone to fetch was found 3 weeks later, shelved in the wrong row, with a thin layer of dust already settling on its spine. The boarding house keeper waited 2 days before reporting him missing. The police searched the building. They found nothing. No body, no note, no sign of struggle, just a quiet space in the world where a young man used to be. The library, for its part, said little. A brief notice appeared in the staff bulletin. His mother received a letter expressing the institution's regret, and that was the end of it officially. But Hollis Whitford is not alone in the long ledger of American disappearances inside buildings that should not be able to swallow a person. The pattern repeats, decade by decade, in places that share a certain quality. Down in New Orleans, in 1887, a notary's clerk named Etienne Boudreau walked into the basement of the old cabildo to file a deed. He carried a lantern and a small leather case. The lantern was found, still lit, sitting upright on the bottom step. The case was found beside it, unopened. Etienne was never found at all. The basement, by every measurement made then and since, has no exit but the stairs he came down. In Boston, in 1911, a young woman named Margaret Doyle vanished from the lower archives of the Athenaeum. She had worked there for 4 years and knew every shelf by memory. Her co-workers heard her humming in the next aisle. The humming stopped. When they walked around the corner, the aisle was empty. The exterior doors were locked. The windows had not been opened in a decade. In Chicago, in 1934, a custodian at the Old Newberry Library walked into a storage room with a mop and a metal bucket. The bucket was found later, still half full of gray water. The mop leaned against the wall. The custodian, a man named Patrick Hennessy, was never seen again. His wife waited at the kitchen table for 3 nights before she understood he was not coming home. These stories share something beyond their endings. Each one happened inside a building dedicated to keeping records. Each one involved a person whose job was to fetch, file, or carry papers from one room to another. Each one took place in a lower level, a basement, an archive, a stack. And in each case, the building gave back some small object, a lantern, a case, a bucket, a mop, as if to say, "Here, this is all I have for you." Folklorists who study disappearances in old institutions have a quiet name for this pattern. They call them threshold vanishings. The idea is simple, even if the truth behind it is not. Some buildings, the theory goes, are more than buildings. They are accumulations. Layers of paper and stone and intention piled so deep that the space inside begins to behave strangely. A clerk passes through a doorway that has been used 10,000 times. On the 10,001st crossing, the doorway opens onto somewhere else. You can call that superstition. Many people do, and they are not wrong to be careful. But the pattern is there in the records, written in the same plain handwriting that recorded everything else. A name, a date, a last known location, a blank space where the next entry should be. Holly's Whitford's mother kept his letters in a wooden box for the rest of her life. She wrote to the library every spring on the anniversary of his disappearance. She asked, gently, whether anything new had been found. The replies grew shorter year by year. Eventually, they stopped coming. The southeast stack where he vanished still stands. The shelves have been renumbered twice since 1908. The lights have been replaced. The floor has been polished by 100,000 soft-soled shoes. But the air in that corner of the building, the librarians will tell you, has never quite warmed up. It holds a coolness that does not belong to any season. Every old building has a smell. Wood polish, dust, the dry breath of stone. But the Library of Congress has something else, something deeper, something the staff have written about for more than a century. They call it the back smell. The scent that lives behind the regular smell of paper and ink and floor wax. It rises from certain corridors on certain days, and once you've smelled it, you remember it forever. A clerk named Elmer Sawyer wrote about it in 1908. His letter is folded into a personnel file that still sits in the archives. He described it as the smell of pine sap and cold iron, like a forest after a hard rain mixed with the inside of a tool shed. He said it came from a hallway near the east stairwell, a hallway that didn't appear on his shift map. He followed it twice. Both times the smell stopped at a blank wall. There are photographs, too. Glass plate negatives from the early days of the building, when official photographers walked the marble halls to record the grand opening. Most of these images are exactly what you'd expect. Long reading rooms, polished floors, brass lamps glowing like little suns, but a few of them have something off in the corners. In one plate from 1898, taken in the main hall, you can see a doorway in the background that shouldn't be there. The architect's drawings show a flat wall in that spot. The photograph shows a dark archway with a wooden door, half open, and what looks like the edge of a bookshelf inside. Researchers who studied the plate in the 1970s assumed it was a temporary partition from construction. But the building had been finished for over a year when the picture was taken. There are objects, too. Real ones, things you could hold in your hand if you were allowed near them. A brass key, 3 inches long, with no markings, was found in 1934 inside a drawer in the cataloging office. No lock in the building matches it. The key is logged as artifact number 1144B. It sits in a small velvet box in a storage room, waiting for a door nobody has found. A pair of reading glasses turned up in 1951, tucked behind a row of books in the law section. The lenses were ground in a style that hadn't been made since the 1860s. The frame had a small engraving on the inside arm. The name read W. Jefferson. No employee by that name ever worked at the library. No reader by that name ever filed a request slip. The glasses are still there in a drawer marked unclaimed property, gathering a soft layer of dust. Then there are the letters. Quiet letters, written by ordinary people, mentioning the strange parts of the building the way you'd mention a draft in an old house. A woman named Cora Bellamy wrote to her sister in 1912 about visiting her husband at work. He was a junior cataloger. She described waiting in a side parlor while he finished his shift. She wrote about a room down the hall where she could hear someone turning pages, slowly, steadily, for nearly an hour. When her husband came to get her, he told her that hallway had been closed off since before he started. The room she heard, he said, didn't have a door anymore. The masons had bricked it up in 1903. A janitor's logbook from 1919 mentions sweeping a corridor on the third tier. He noted the date, the time, the corridor letter. The corridor letter does not exist in any modern map. When the logbook was rebound in the 1980s, an archivist made a small note in pencil at the bottom of the page. The note reads, "Corridor K not located. Even the dust tells stories." In 1962, a maintenance crew opened a service panel behind a marble column. Inside, they found a small space, maybe 4 feet deep, lined with old shelving. On the shelves sat 7 books. Their spines were cracked. Their pages were yellow. None of them appeared in the library's records. The titles were in English, but the authors' names were unfamiliar, and the publishers listed cities that no longer existed by those names. The books were photographed, logged, and placed in a secure cabinet for further study. The further study never happened. They are still there, sealed behind glass, smelling faintly of pine sap and cold iron and something older than both. You can dismiss a story. You can argue with a memory. But a key without a lock, a pair of glasses without an owner, a book without a record, these things are harder to wave away. They sit in their drawers, patient as stones, waiting for someone to ask the right question. There is a story that gets told in certain families around Washington. Not loud, not at parties. It comes out late, after the dishes are cleared and the coffee is poured, when someone mentions the Library of Congress and an older relative goes quiet for a moment. Then they say it. The cage. The locked cage on the 4th tier. The story belongs to the Hennessy family first, as far as anyone can trace. Old Tom Hennessy worked the stacks in the 1890s, back when the new building was still fresh and the marble still smelled like the quarry. He came home one night to his wife in their little row house on G Street and sat at the kitchen table without taking off his coat. She said his hands were shaking. She said he poured himself a small glass of whiskey, which he never did on a weeknight, and he told her about the cage. It sat on the fourth tier of the east stacks. A wire mesh enclosure, floor to ceiling, the kind they used for rare books and restricted volumes. Only this one had no card on the door. No label, no catalog number. The padlock was heavy and old, older than the building itself, and the key was not on any ring Tom Hennessy had ever seen. Inside, he said, were shelves of books bound in dark leather, and the spines had no titles. Just numbers. Long numbers, like dates that ran past any year a man could live to see. Tom told his wife to never speak of it. She told their daughter anyway, years later, on a winter afternoon when the daughter asked why her father woke up some nights and walked the house. The story moved sideways through the family after that. Tom's daughter married a man named Foley, and the Foleys carried it into the new century. By the 1930s, it had a few new pieces. A cousin claimed Tom had touched the lock once, just rested his palm on it, and the metal was warm. Warm like a coffee cup, in a building kept cool for the paper. The Foley children grew up hearing about the warm lock and the books with numbers for names, and they passed it to their children, and a few details fell away in the passing. Nobody could remember the exact tier anymore, only that it was the fourth. Nobody could remember which stairwell, only that it was the one with the green tile. Other families had pieces too. The Brennans, whose grandfather swept floors at the library during the First World War, told a version where the cage held not books but boxes. Wooden crates stacked to the ceiling, each one stamped with a single word in a language nobody could read. The Brennan grandfather said the crates hummed faintly if you stood close. He said he only walked past that part of the stack once and never again. A family named Carver, out in Maryland, has a different version still. Their great-grandmother worked as a typist for one of the librarians in 1908. She told her grandchildren the cage had a small brass plate on it, and on the plate was a name. Just a name, a man's name, with no dates and no title. She said the librarian she worked for would not say the name aloud. He would only point to it on the ledger and tap his finger twice. The stories have softened over the years, the way river stones soften. Edges polished smooth by retelling. A grandchild leaves out the warm lock because it sounds silly. A nephew drops the humming crates because his wife rolls her eyes. What remains in every family is the cage itself. The fourth tier, the lock with no key, the shelves with no labels. A woman named Eleanor Foley Briggs, who is in her 70s now and lives in Alexandria, told a local historian a few years back that her grandfather had said one last thing about it. Something Tom Hennessy whispered to his daughter when he was very old and his mind was wandering between rooms. He said the cage was not built to keep people out. He said the cage was built to keep something in. And he said the lock had been changed twice in his time at the library. Both times because the old lock was found hanging open on the floor, and nothing inside the cage had moved, and no one had any idea who had opened it. Eleanor said her grandfather died on a Sunday morning in 1931. The family Bible has the date. The library has no record of the cage, but the families still talk. Step away from the arguments for a moment. Step away from the believers with their candles and the skeptics with their blueprints. Step into the quieter thing that sits underneath all of it. Because something happened in that building, and whatever it was, it mattered enough to leave a mark on the people who worked there. In the long years between the two world wars, the Library of Congress did something it never advertised. It became a quiet partner to the War Department. Crates arrived at the back loading docks in the gray hours before dawn. The wood was stamped with letters and numbers that meant nothing to the porters. The men who carried them in were told not to ask. The men who signed for them were told not to write down what they had signed. These crates did not go to the reading rooms. They did not go to the public stacks where scholars sat under green lamps and turned the pages of old books. They went down through service elevators that locked with brass keys only 3 people held. Down into the tiers below the tiers, where the air grew cool and dry and smelled faintly of iron. What was inside them, nobody alive today can say for sure. Maps, some whispered. Maps of coastlines and ports and bridges. Files on foreign men in foreign cities. Reports written in pencil by clerks who had been told to use pencil so the words could be erased. Photographs sealed in heavy envelopes with red string wound around small paper buttons. The librarians who handled this cargo were not ordinary librarians. They wore the same dark suits as everyone else. They drank coffee in the same break rooms, but they had taken oaths nobody else in the building had taken. They signed papers that promised silence even after death. And when they passed each other in the hallways, they nodded the way soldiers nod, not the way coworkers do. This is the quiet truth that sits under the whole legend. The Library of Congress was never just a library. It was the largest collection of paper in the country, and paper was power, and power needed somewhere to hide. The marble palace on the hill was the perfect place. Who would think to look for secrets inside a building dedicated to sharing knowledge? So rooms were sealed. Doors were painted over. Hallways that appeared on one set of drawings vanished from the next. The men who did the sealing were not magicians or ghosts. They were carpenters from Maryland and Virginia, paid in cash, given lunch in a small office near the loading dock, and sent home with the warning that what they had built was not to be discussed. Some of those carpenters told their wives anyway. The wives told their sisters. The sisters told their children. And that is how the story moved out into the world in the slow, soft way that real secrets travel, passing from kitchen table to kitchen table over plates of cooling potatoes. A woman in Alexandria remembered her father coming home one night in 1934 with white plaster dust still in his hair. He sat down at the table and would not eat. He said he had built a room with no door. He said he had been paid extra not to remember where. He never spoke of it again, but for the rest of his life he flinched when he passed the library on the trolley. A man in Baltimore kept a small wooden box his uncle had given him. Inside the box was a brass key with no markings. The uncle had been a custodian at the library in the 1940s. On his deathbed, he handed the key to his nephew and said only, "Fourth tier, west side, do not use it." The nephew never did. The key still sits in a drawer somewhere in a row house off Pratt Street. These are not ghost stories. These are family stories. They are the soft, ordinary residue of something real. People built things. People hid things. People carried home dust on their shoulders and a weight in their chest, and they passed that weight down to their children, and their children passed it down again. Whatever waits in those uncatalogued rooms, the truth is this: a community of workers, clerks, carpenters, and quiet men in dark suits gave their lives over to a secret. They never saw the inside of the rooms they sealed. They never knew what they were guarding, but they knew it mattered. And they carried that knowing all the way to the grave. The building remembers them, even if the country has forgotten. Their fingerprints are still pressed into the plaster. Their breath is still folded into the air between the shelves. Picture yourself standing inside the Jefferson building well after midnight. The great bronze doors are locked. The tourists are long gone. The marble floors have cooled, and the air carries that hush only old libraries know, a hush that feels less like silence and more like a held breath. Above you, the painted ceiling fades into shadow. The gilded names of poets and philosophers glint faintly where a single safety lamp throws its yellow glow. You came here for the card catalog, or rather, what's left of it. Most of the old wooden drawers were moved or retired decades ago, swapped out for screens and search bars. But a few cabinets still stand in a back corridor near the closed stacks. They smell of cedar and old glue. The brass pulls have been worn smooth by 100 years of fingers. You slide one open. The cards inside whisper as they shift, like dry leaves stirred by a small wind. Each card is the size of a playing card, cream-colored, edges softened with age. Each one carries a few neat lines of black ink. Title, author, call number. The handwriting is careful, slanted, taught in some long-ago schoolroom where penmanship still mattered. Now here is the thing the night librarians used to talk about, back when there were still night librarians who walked these halls with rings of brass keys. Some of the cards in these drawers were written by people who could not have written them. Names matched to handwriting belonging to clerks who had died years before the books on the cards were even printed. A card for a 1908 monograph, written in the hand of a man buried in 1891. A card for a German pamphlet from the 20s, inked in the careful loops of a woman who left the library in 1899 and never returned. You hold one of these cards between your fingers. It feels no different from the others. The paper has the same soft give. The ink has the same faded gray-black where time has done its slow work. But the date on the book is wrong. The hand on the card is wrong. And the call number points to a shelf that, when you check the modern records, does not appear to exist. Outside the tall arched windows, Washington is asleep. The Capitol dome rises across the plaza, lit pale and quiet against a sky the color of wet slate. A few stars manage to push through the city's glow, faint pinpricks above the dome's crown. The street lamps along First Street pool gold on empty sidewalks. A guard's footsteps echo somewhere far below, then fade, then return, like the breathing of the building itself. You step away from the cabinet and walk down the corridor. The marble underfoot is veined with gray and rose. The walls climb up into mosaic arches, into figures of women holding scrolls and lamps and keys. At night, with only the safety lamps burning, those figures seem to lean closer, listening with you. The air is cool. It smells of paper, of waxed wood, of stone that has held its temperature for 100 winters. A clock somewhere strikes a single soft tone. Not the hour, just a quarter chime, low and round, swallowed quickly by the long halls. You let yourself feel how small you are inside this place. How thin the soles of your shoes feel against floors laid by men whose names nobody remembers. How quiet the building gets when it thinks no one is watching. You think about all those cards, thousands of them, most written by living hands. Some written, apparently, by hands that should have been still. You think about how the cards must have entered the drawers. Someone, somewhere, slid them in. Maybe in daylight, mixed with a stack of legitimate cards from a junior cataloger. Maybe at night, by a figure who knew exactly where to file. Nobody saw it happen. Nobody ever has. The legend says that if you stand near these cabinets long enough on a still night, you can hear the faintest sound from inside them. Not voices, not footsteps, just a soft, papery rustle like a card being placed gently into its proper place. Then nothing. Then perhaps another, hours later, in a different drawer entirely. You stand still and listen. The building breathes around you. Somewhere a radiator ticks. Somewhere a pipe sighs. Above the dome of the reading room, beyond the painted muses, beyond the stars and the slate-colored sky, the night keeps its own slow record. And here, in this corridor, the drawers wait, patient, wooden, full of small cream cards, each one a tiny door, each one signed, in careful ink, by hands that have not held a pen in a very, very long time. Every old building leaves a mark on the people who work inside it. The Library of Congress is no different. After more than 100 years of strange stories, quiet sightings, and rooms that come and go like clouds, the place has grown a kind of soul. The people who walk its halls every day carry that soul with them. They speak about it in soft voices, in break rooms, in the long shadows between the stacks. There is one story they tell more than any other. It is the story of the room behind the main reading room. The main reading room is the heart of the building. You have seen it in photographs. A great round chamber under a painted dome, with desks fanning out like the spokes of a wheel. The walls climb in golden tiers. Statues of old thinkers look down from their perches. Marble columns the color of cream and honey hold up the high arches. Light pours in from the windows above and pools on the polished wood floor. It is one of the most beautiful rooms in America. But behind the desks, behind the curved wall of books, there is another room. The librarians call it the Hollow. No tourist has ever seen it. No public map shows the way. The Hollow sits in the space between the round wall of the reading room and the square walls of the building that holds it. A wedge of forgotten air. A pocket the architects had to leave behind when they fit a circle inside a box. For most of the building's life, that space was simply storage. Old chairs, broken lamps, crates of paper waiting to be sorted. But sometime around 1908, a librarian named Estelle Burroughs began to notice that things she put in the Hollow did not always stay where she left them. A box of index cards moved 3 feet to the left overnight. A reading lamp turned itself to face the wall. A stack of old newspapers rearranged itself by date, oldest on top, when she had left them in no order at all. Estelle wrote a short note about it in her work diary. She did not call it haunted. She did not call it strange. She simply wrote, "The Hollow tidies up after itself." Then she went back to work. That little phrase became a kind of password among the staff. For over a century, librarians who knew about the Hollow would use it when they wanted to talk about the building's quieter mysteries. A book reshelved by no one, a lamp left burning in a locked room, a door that opened by itself when the air pressure changed. They would shrug and smile and say, "The Hollow tidies up after itself." It became a tradition. New hires were brought in slowly. Nobody sat them down and warned them. Instead, on their first overnight shift, an older librarian would walk them past the Hollow's narrow door and say nothing. The new ones always asked. The older ones always smiled. That smile was the welcome. The story spread out from there in soft ripples. Cleaners learned it. Security guards learned it. The men who fixed the heating pipes learned it. By the 1950s, even the carpenters who came to repair the woodwork knew not to ask too many questions about what they found behind the walls. A few of them began leaving small gifts. A pencil set on a shelf, a penny placed on a windowsill, a folded square of paper tucked behind a brick. Nobody ever spoke about why. It was simply what you did, the way some people toss a coin in a fountain. The building had been good to them. The building got something back. Outside the walls, the wider city of Washington never quite caught on. Tourists came and went. Senators came and went. Presidents came and went. But the people who actually kept the lights on in that great marble building knew something the rest of the country did not. They knew that the place was alive in some small, slow way. Not dangerous, not loud, just present. The way an old dog is present in the corner of a room. Some of the retired librarians still meet for lunch once a year at a little restaurant on Pennsylvania Avenue. They are old now, in their 70s and 80s, with soft voices and good memories. They raise their glasses and toast the building. They toast Mr. Jefferson and his 47 crates. They toast the fire that started it all and the fire that started it again. And then, Just before they sit back down, they raise their glasses one more time. To the hollow, they say, to the room that tidies up after itself. Her name was Margaret Ellsworth, and she left Washington in the spring of 1968. She had worked in the stacks for 31 years. She was 64 when she packed her small apartment on Capitol Hill into 2 steamer trunks and a hat box, and rode the train west to a town in Oregon called Brookings, where her sister kept a clapboard house above the sea. She told her neighbors there she had been a clerk for the government. She did not say which one. She did not say much at all. But she kept a journal, and that journal still exists, kept now in a private collection by her great-niece in Portland. The pages are soft as old linen. The ink has faded to the color of weak tea. And in those pages, Margaret Ellsworth told the story she could not tell while she still wore the brass identification pin of the Library of Congress. She wrote about the West Stack. She wrote about it the way a sailor writes about a stretch of water where a ship once vanished. Careful, quiet, always coming back to it, then drifting away. The West Stack, she said, was the place the senior librarians did not assign to new staff. You learned about it slowly, the way you learn about a relative who drinks. There were rows that ended in plaster walls that should not have been plaster walls. There were brass numbers on the iron shelves that skipped from 41 to 43 with nothing in between. And there was a particular smell on the lower tier, she wrote, like wet stone and pipe tobacco, though no one had smoked in the building for decades. Margaret left because of one night in November of 1967. She wrote about it only once, in a long entry filled with crossings out and second tries. She had stayed late to reshelve a cart of bound periodicals. The overhead lamps in the West Stack ran on old pull cords. She pulled one, and the bulb above her head was warm, as if it had been burning already. She had not turned it on. No one else was in the building. The night guard had locked the east doors an hour before. She left the cart where it stood. She rode the streetcar home and did not sleep. Within 6 months, she was on a train to Oregon. In Brookings, she became the kind of woman the town called eccentric in a fond way. She kept a small library of her own in the front parlor, alphabetized by a system only she understood. She tended a garden of sea thrift and rosemary. She wrote letters to old colleagues in Washington, and a few of those letters survive, folded into the back of her journal like pressed flowers. In them, she asked careful questions. Had anyone catalogued the lower tier yet? Had the chalk marks been photographed? Was the cage on the 4th tier still locked? The replies, when they came, were short and uncomfortable. One colleague, a woman named Helen Roy, wrote back that the survey crews had come and gone twice, and that nobody spoke of the West Stack anymore at staff meetings. Another wrote that a new director had ordered the old plaster walls left alone. A third simply wrote, "Margaret, please stop asking." She did not stop. She told the story to her sister, and her sister told her own daughter. And that daughter grew up with the legend of the West stack the way other children grow up with stories of haunted lighthouses. By the time the great-niece inherited the journal in 1994, the story had traveled 3,000 miles from the building where it began. It had crossed the Mississippi, climbed the Rockies, and settled in a small white house above the Pacific. And still, it sounded like Washington. Still, it smelled of paper and lamp oil and old stone. That is how a legend lives in exile. It does not get smaller, it gets quieter. It learns to fit inside a journal, inside a parlor, inside the careful voice of an old woman telling her great-niece about a brass shelf number that skipped from 41 to 43. The great-niece, whose name is Joanna, has visited the Library of Congress twice. Both times she asked a reading room attendant about the West Stack. Both times she received a polite, blank look and a redirection to the public tour. She did not press. She had not come for answers. She had come to stand in the same hallway her great-aunt had stood in, and to feel, for a moment, the weight of all that paper above her head and the colder weight of whatever else still waited inside the walls. In the spring of 2004, a small team gathered in a basement office of the Madison building. They carried clipboards and laptops, soft pencils, and rolls of acid-free tape. Their task sounded simple on paper. They were going to walk the old Jefferson building from the lowest cellar to the copper-green dome and confirm, room by room, that every space matched the master plan on file. The team was made up of 6 people. There was an architect from a private firm hired by the library. There was a structural engineer who knew the old steel by name. There were 2 junior librarians with fresh degrees and bright shoes. And there were 2 older men, retired stack supervisors, brought back because they remembered the building the way a farmer remembers his fields. They started where any sensible person would start. They started at the front door, under the great bronze lamps, beneath the painted ceiling where muses watched with calm gray eyes. They worked outward in slow loops, like a stone dropped in still water. The first week went smoothly. They confirmed reading rooms, offices, marble stairs, brass railings polished by 100 years of hands. Every door matched a number. Every number matched a line on the plan. Then they went down. The trouble began on the 3rd sublevel, in a corridor lined with pale green tile. The architect counted 12 doors along the east wall. The plan showed 11. The team measured the corridor 3 times. They measured the rooms inside. The numbers refused to add up. There was a space, narrow as a closet, that existed between 2 storage rooms and belonged to neither. It had a door. The door had no handle. The plan did not show it at all. They marked it with a small piece of blue tape and moved on. They told themselves they would come back. By the end of the 2nd week, the blue tape had multiplied. There were 41 pieces. 41 rooms, alcoves, stairwells, and dead-end hallways that did not appear on any drawing in the library's archive. Some were small as broom closets. One was the size of a ballroom and held nothing but a long wooden table coated in gray dust. The retired supervisors stood in the doorway of that one and would not step inside. They said the air felt wrong. They said it felt like the room was holding its breath. The architect tried to be reasonable. He pulled the 1897 plans, the 1923 revisions, the 1965 modernization survey, the 1986 fire code update. He laid them on top of each other on a long, light table. Where one map showed a wall, another showed open space. Where one showed a stairway, another showed solid stone. The building seemed to shift between drafts like a sleeping body turning under a blanket. The junior librarians grew quiet. They had come into the project laughing. By the fourth week, they walked the halls in pairs and kept their voices low. There is a memo dated late summer of that year that survives in a folder marked only with a case number. It is short. It says the survey has encountered, in plain language, more uncatalogued spaces than the team can reasonably document within the project's budget. It recommends a phased approach. It recommends additional funding. It recommends consultation with the architect of the Capitol. No phased approach was approved. No additional funding came. The consultation was never scheduled. The folder went into a filing cabinet on the second floor of the Madison building, and the cabinet was locked, and the key, by all accounts, was lost. Since then, there have been other small efforts. A graduate student in 2011 tried to map the lower stacks for a thesis and abandoned the project halfway through. A documentary crew in 2017 was given a tour of the public areas and politely declined access to anything below the second sublevel. A senator's aide in 2019 asked for a complete room count and was given a number that, when checked against the floor plans, came up 47 rooms short. The aide did not ask again. The library has never said the rooms are not there. The library has never said they are. The library simply continues, day after day, lending books, hosting scholars, lighting its lamps at dusk and dimming them at dawn. And somewhere in the green-tiled corridors, somewhere behind the doors with no handles, somewhere in the ballroom with the dust-covered table, the blue tape from 2004 is still stuck to the walls. It has faded now. It curls at the corners. It waits, like a question nobody finished asking, for someone to come back and finish the count. So here we are, you and I, at the end of a long telling. The fire has burned down to a soft red glow. The logs have settled into ash. The wind outside has gone quiet the way it does in the smallest hours when even the trees seem to be sleeping. And somewhere far from where you lie, on a hill above the Potomac, a great stone building sits under the same dark sky. Picture it now. The dome of the old reading room shines pale green under the moon. The copper has weathered to the color of a calm sea. The marble walls are silver where the moonlight touches them, and deep blue in the shadows. The fountains out front are still. The water rests like a sheet of glass. A single guard walks the long marble hall, his footsteps soft, his lantern bobbing like a firefly down a tunnel of books. The Library of Congress is sleeping, as much as a place like that can sleep. Up in the high windows, the lamps are off. The mosaics on the ceiling glow only when there is light to wake them, and tonight there is none. The painted figures of learning and memory and truth stand quiet in the dark. The gold leaf rests. The marble lions out by the steps wear their thin coats of dew, and their stone eyes look out across the empty avenue toward the Capitol, where one window still burns at this late hour. Below all that beauty, the stacks go down and down. Tier upon tier of iron and glass, mile upon mile of paper. Ink that was wet 200 years ago, dry now and patient. Somewhere on the fourth tier, the old cage still hangs in its corner, its lock the color of dried tea. Somewhere in the west stack, a draft moves between shelves that no map fully describes. A page turns in a room that has no door, or maybe it does not turn at all, and the sound was only the building breathing. The chalk marks are still there, faint as old breath on glass. The sealed stairwell still climbs up to nothing or down to something. The subbasement keeps its secrets the way good libraries